everyone, and welcome. On behalf of the East Brunswick Public Library, it's my pleasure to welcome you to our fourth and final panel for Local Author Day today, Saturday, October 15th, 2023. I'd also like to extend a warm welcome to those of you attending virtually. Thank you to Melissa Hosick, Adult Programming Librarian, for planning and implementing this event. My name is Teresa Agostinelli. My pronouns are she, her, and I'll be serving as host for our final panel. As a reminder, a selection of our panelists' books are available for sale here today, and panelists will be on hand to sign purchase copies of their books. We're going to be starting off with the first half hour of this session with questions from me, and then we're going to be opening up to the floor virtually and physically for questions from the audience. I'd like everyone to turn off or silence their phones right now. So this final panel is entitled Tackling Challenging Topics. It's my pleasure to introduce our three panelists: Brooke Beyfuss, Aparna Parthasarathy, Dr. Shirley Russick-Wachtel. So before we get started, I want to ask, starting with Brooke, if everyone can share their social media handles and websites so people can learn more about your work after the session is done.
So my name is Brooke Beyfuss, and my website is brookebeyfuss.com, and my Instagram handle and Facebook handle are all at Brooke Beyfuss.
My name is Aparna Parthasarathy, and all my social media is at APAR0806. This is my Instagram, my Medium account for other stories that I write.
My name is Shirley Russick-Wachtel, and I can be reached at shirleywachtel.com, and all the other handles are Shirley Wachtel as well.
Thank you. So our first question, I'm going to start with Brooke, and we'll move on down the row. What inspired you to become an author?
I became an author mainly because I had a whole cast of characters kind of gestating in my head, and I knew that if I didn't give birth to them, they were going to make me crazy. So it was more of a forced decision as opposed to something I really thought about. But I always had stories in my head. I always knew I wanted to share them with people. It took me a long time to kind of get started on my career path as a writer. I had very bad fear of flying as far as being afraid to kind of share my work with others. But once I got going, I found I really couldn't stop. So I think that was really my path.
I became a writer and I wrote this book because growing up, I've always been an avid reader. I've loved reading other people's stories. And throughout my time in high school and even in middle school, I worked with women from across the world, and hearing their stories and seeing what they go through made me want to share their stories and share my story through their eyes.
Okay, well, I guess I became a writer since I was a young kid. I've been writing, and I had so many stories in my head, and I was influenced a lot by the books I read. I was always an avid reader, and writing was a wonderful outlet for me, and I still enjoy it to this day, and I write as much as I can every day.
Oh, see, I love when that happens. It's a perfect segue. So can you describe your writing process? Expand upon that. Do you maintain a set schedule? Do you write when inspiration hits? We're going to start with Brooke again.
I do have a schedule. I can't trust inspiration because it hits at the most inconvenient of times. So I usually do write every single day. I am generally lying in bed writing late at night because I'm a definite night owl. And I write every single day, usually about 4 to 5 hours in the evening. And yeah, it just keeps me going. And I find that when I'm not writing, I definitely miss it. So even though it's a lot of hard work, it is something that I kind of crave once I got going.
Yeah, I'm the exact same. I write, I need to have a schedule. I plan my entire life like to the T, like with Google Calendar and everything. And I write, especially at night too. For some reason, like as I fall asleep, I start thinking of things that I need to add and need to write, it's very odd, but I go with it. So I'm writing like 1 a.m., writing parts of the story because that's when I have the most ideas, but I try and do it every day.
Okay, I'm impressed by their writing at night. I don't usually write at night, but I do come up with a lot of ideas at night. So I have a little notepad by my side, and I'll kind of put the germ of an idea right down. But I have a weird writing way of writing. I write in longhand because I feel there's a better connection with my head to the pen, to the paper. So I'll write in longhand. I write 3 pages every day, no matter what. And then when I finish a chapter, I'll read the 3 pages over, I'll revise them, and then I'll type each chapter. So that's my process. And somehow at the end of it, I have a book.
I love that. I know when I take notes, I always write things down. If I'm at a meeting, I don't like to type it on the computer. I write it in longhand, and then later I will type it so it really sinks in. So I relate to that. Do you have people in your life that you use to bounce ideas off of that you can trust before things go to your editor or other places?
I do. So I run and I actually founded the Woodbridge writing group, which is about 9 years old right now. And we have been meeting twice a month in person all through. We made it through COVID and we still survive. I have about 9 members right now. And they are a wonderful sounding board. What I generally do is we go in and we read our work a chapter at a time. So it's especially helpful when you're working on something new to kind of get those first ears on it and kind of get a feel for how it's sounding and how it's going. And they have been a wonderful source of support to me. And it's primarily senior citizens who have retired in my group, which is really fun because there's so many new perspectives that we get just from the diversity of the group. And it's really a great group.
I would have to say that most people I run my ideas by are definitely my family, my mom, my dad, and my brother. Because my book is a collection of short stories, I had a list of like 10 different story ideas that I was thinking about writing, and I ran every single one of them by my family, like telling them, what do you think about this one? What are your thoughts on this plot, on these characters? And they really helped me. They especially helped me edit. I'm not a person who can edit as much as I can write, especially cutting words down, all that kind of stuff. It's just not something that I'm as good at, but they are really good at, and they're very helpful when it comes to helping me tweak in my work and to make my ideas better.
Okay, well, I have 3 very close friends that have been a great sounding board for me, and they read my work and they've given me great suggestions. One is a friend that I've known since we were in high school, and she's also a writer, and she's been great with that. And another is a colleague of mine who also teaches English, giving me a little bit different perspective. And then I have another friend right here. Our kids grew up together and we've been very close friends all through the years. And she just likes to read, and she gives me yet another perspective. And beyond that, I'm always bothering some of my other friends who are readers, and I really am very appreciative for their feedback, which they've been giving me for a long time.
Thank you. So I'd like to start with Brooke. This question is just for you. How do you choose topics for your novels, and are they inspired by current events?
So I tend to have characters before I have topics. The characters definitely come to me first, and I have a degree in psychology, so it's always really fun to me to kind of get a new character and break into their psyche and see what their issue is, what they're thinking about. My debut novel was definitely inspired by a current event, but it was current back in 1997, so not really relevant now. But I got the idea when I was in college. The Hale-Bopp comet was coming through New England, which is where I went to college. And when we were up there, we decided to drive to Vermont and see no light pollution, just watch the beautiful Hale-Bopp comet. And we did that. And then about a week later, we heard the news break about Heaven's Gate, which was one of the largest suicide cults in ever. So that kind of event just kind of stuck with me. And I remember hearing that they all had died by suicide. And I wondered what would have happened if one of them hadn't passed. What if one of them had survived and was coming to in this, totally new world that they had no idea of how it operated. So that was the jumping off point for my story after we were stolen.
Thank you. And the next question is for Aparna. What inspired you to become an advocate for women's rights?
I feel like I've been an advocate since I was a kid. And so basically in the foreword of my book, I talk about my first experience with women's rights. When I was in elementary school, we had this project where we had to be wax figurines of famous figures. And I chose to do Malala Yousafzai. And this was like shortly after she had just won her Nobel Peace Prize. And that was the first time I had ever learned about women's rights and women's issues. And I remember feeling incredibly passionate about something that I didn't realize was a right. I assumed education was guaranteed for all women everywhere, and I learned that that wasn't the case. And I think pretty much since then, women's rights has always been my passion, and advocating for women who don't have the same privileges I do has always been something that I have done and will continue to do.
Thank you. And a question for Dr. Wachtel. As a child of Holocaust survivors, how has this influenced your life and writing?
Yeah, my parents' journey at that time, I think, is my greatest motivator for my writing. My mother, both my parents from Poland. My mother was one of 8. And surviving, there were only 3 who survived, and she lost everyone. I don't even have a picture of my grandparents. My father was in the Lodz ghetto, and he is the only survivor of his family from a family of 5. And I don't have any pictures of any of them. And knowing that, I felt that I had to do something with my life that could give meaning, and talk about, the importance of family. I felt that I had to make a statement, and I try to do that with my writing. I try to write. I'm most interested in writing stories of family and exploring the idea of how past trauma affects all our actions, all our attitudes in life today. And so there are so many more stories to tell that in a way, I feel like I've just begun that.
I'm going to segue to the question, what impact would you like your books to have on your readers? And I'm going to start with Dr. Wachtel and move it this way.
Okay. I hope that my readers, no matter who they are, see themselves in the characters and can empathize with the characters. That's what I think most writers want. And to have the readers really feel like they're living in that world, that's what I would hope. And beyond that, the idea that, I guess, to have empathy for one another after they're done, after they see the characters in themselves, and that would be my hope.
I would definitely have to agree, just for the ability for my readers to understand where these women are coming from. There's 4 different women in my story, ranging all the way from World War II all the way to present day, from different continents. They're of different ages, and they experience so many different problems, but the uniting factor is the strength they have in overcoming. And I think the one thing that I would want my readers to take away from this would be, just to admire the strength and courage and bravery that women around the world have, and in order to face the conflicts that they do. and also to have a more intersectional perspective on feminism, to realize that there are more issues with feminism than just women not having an education, and not all developing countries are automatically sexist or they lack feminist culture, because that's simply not true. And there are a lot of families and people out there that are fighting for women to have rights in all shapes and sizes, and no matter how it comes.
So I would say that my writing primarily really celebrates the strength of the human spirit. And I write about very damaged, very broken characters who undergo a lot of trauma. And I always try and show their journey from the beginning of their path to the end, where they are able to at least be on the start of a path to healing. I find it's very fascinating, the psychology of the human mind and how much we can endure and how much trauma changes us. And even if you feel like you're somebody who has no trauma in your life, everyone's had trauma. And it really does shape people as individuals. And I really think that I want to hold kind of a mirror up to the reader, and so that they can kind of see, even on a small scale, themselves and the characters, and kind of really be able to share that empathy with them.
Thank you. I'm going to start with Brooke now. We're going to work this way with the next question. Could you please describe your research process for the topics that you cover in your writing?
So I do a lot of really grisly research. And for my debut novel, After We Were Stolen, it's centered around a doomsday cult. And so I did a ton of research on cult activity, about leadership in cults, in large and small. I read everything I could find. I watched a ton of documentaries, and it was very intriguing to me, not only because of the strength of a cult as a whole, but the level of kind of the members who come into them, kind of where they need to be psychologically. And it's very easy to get caught up in a situation like this. People always see crazy stories, and so I would never get involved with something like that. I would never be suckered into something like that. It's not a matter of intelligence. It's not a matter of being gullible. It's these are people who are always kind of looking for something else out of life. They're looking for some kind of meaning, some kind of pathway, and those are the type of people who are very susceptible to cult behavior. So that was primarily my research for that one. For my second book, I did a lot of research on adolescent psychology. I have two main characters, one of whom is just fresh out of adolescence, one who is just about to enter it. And they both underwent tremendous trauma, and they come together in a found family type situation. So that book really is focused a lot on the meaning of family, and you know, how the family that we're born into is not necessarily the family we're meant to continue our whole lives. So cracking open a lot of my psychology books for research. And yeah, it's definitely fascinating and often very troubling.
My research process definitely took a lot of time, being able to find stories that often aren't shared to the public, that aren't often highlighted because people don't think it's important. And I deliberately wanted to choose stories and women from countries that aren't ever really spoken about, places like Mali, countries in Africa specifically that aren't being helped, countries in South Asia that aren't being helped. And to find that research definitely did take a very long time. But it was incredibly important to me that I worked to find sources and find research that could back my book and that could back the perspectives of women from so many different backgrounds.
Well, I come from a little different angle here. My research is really my life. It's a lot of my memories growing up. I mean, you're going back to, 60s, 70s and prior. And so I do remember a lot, but I do a lot of research as well into what people were interested in those periods, because I am doing literary history, historical fiction. And for example, I finished a book and the main character is a baker. So I didn't know really all that much about baking other than baking with my granddaughter. So I did a little research about opening a bakery and how that business works. And now I'm writing a novel where I've done some research on what Vienna looked like during World War II. So I do. Some research comes from my own life, and some research comes from things that I'm always learning about.
Okay, we're going to start with Brooke again. Can you describe your path to publication?
Yeah, I had a really weird path to publication, and I hope it's an inspiration to aspiring writers out there that you should not give up on things just because they don't sell the first time. So I'll kind of start backwards. So I wrote Before You Found Me, which I wrote between 2010 2012, and it was my first book. I was very enthusiastic about it. I had no idea what I was doing, but I was able to write it. I edited it, and I got an agent with it. So I was over the moon. I thought, yay, I have an agent. I'm going to get published now. Not the case. So my book went out on submission, and it died on submission. So we didn't have any publisher interest. Nobody really wanted to pursue it. So I was very disappointed. I had to trunk it. Broke my heart to do so, but I kept writing, and I kept kind of pushing the envelope and going a little bit further each time with my work. And then I wrote a few years later. I wrote After We Were Stolen. So I wrote After We Were Stolen, and it went on submission, and it was sold to Sourcebooks. So Sourcebooks contacted us, and we had a meeting with my editor and with my agent, and they said, we'd really love to offer you a 2-book deal. Do you have another book? And I did. So that was how my first novel, which was my true debut, became my second published novel.
So I worked with a publisher called New Degree Press, and they helped me out a lot. They work a lot with first-time authors, which was genuinely appreciated in my case because I knew nothing about the publishing process, especially still being in high school and having to manage all my workload and everything, and also writing this novel. They definitely were very flexible with my schedule and helped me out a lot. And so I was partnered with multiple editors, people who helped me when I was initially writing the book, who I could also bounce ideas off of and who would read my pages as I submitted them. And also people who helped me edit after I was done with the first draft for grammatical errors and just for general content ideas. And there were a lot of people that helped bring this cover to life, which I am incredibly proud of. And so working with these publishers definitely helped me a lot and allowed me to create a product that I'm genuinely proud of.
Well, getting published for me was a very, very long and arduous process. I've written several books. I must have sent out, and this was when computers were, in their really initial stages. So I sent out to probably over 300 agents and publishers. And I ended up self-publishing a few of my works. One book, My Mother's Shoes, is a memoir, and it trace my mother's life right before, during, and after the Holocaust and coming to America. And parallel to it, my voice was the other voice in the book. So my life and what it's like being the child of survivors. But I've written several books since then. A couple have been self-published. A couple of books, I also wrote some children's books, and a couple of books, there were small publishers publish those books. I consider Castle in Brooklyn my debut novel because I was fortunate enough to secure an agent. I was with another agent for 10 years and nothing happened with that. But I have a wonderful agent now, and she's with William Morris. And I got the book in the hands of Little A, which is an imprint of Amazon Publishing. And really, it just took off from there. I have a terrific editor who understands me and understands what I'm trying to do. But again, I want to reiterate what was said here. Just keep writing. If that's what you want to do, don't give up. I felt I couldn't give up. There were many times I felt like giving up in a way, because it's kind of depressing to get all those rejection letters, but eventually, thankfully, it worked out.
Thank you. And actually, I wanted to talk a little bit about something Aparna mentioned with the cover. How did your cover art come about? For noticing the beautiful covers here, and that's often what catches my eye. We read reviews from the paper and magazines, but when I'm just browsing in the library or in the bookstore, so I want to know, like, starting with Brooke, how is your cover art created? Or do you have any contact with the illustrator or any input in how the work is depicted visually?
So we have conversations about the way we want things to kind of look. I have those conversations with my editor, and then she brings feedback back to the design team. Ultimately, I don't have final say in what the cover looks like. I was very fortunate in that I absolutely adore both of my covers, and I worked with wonderful graphic artists who designed them. And once the covers are completed, they actually make several different covers, and then they send them through market research. So they see which ones are best received by readers, and which are most likely to be picked up based on the cover art. Same goes for the title. That's how we workshopped our titles. And again, I was super lucky to have great artists. And once we got the covers back, I was able to make notes and kind of send them back with suggestions that fortunately they were taken. So it was a very positive experience working with the designers.
So in order to build my cover, I actually work with someone outside of the publishing company. And so the cover was actually drawn by a local artist in India that my family knows. I first came up with the title Tales of the Invisible, and he took that and he ran with it. And so there's 4 women all trapped in a jail cell. And I think it's such a beautiful portrayal of what the book actually is about. And when I gave it to the publishing company, they were over the moon. They loved the cover, and they took it and they printed it out onto the book.
Okay, well, I did have some input on the cover, but my input wasn't used because I'm not an artist, I'm a writer. So, but I love the way the cover came out. They have a whole department of artists at Little A, and they gave me, they asked me what I thought of 2 covers, and went with this one, and they all loved this one, and I'm just very happy with the way it turned out. My idea for a cover was to have a house, because a house and kind of a castle in the background. I don't know what I was thinking, but it's a castle in Brooklyn. But I really love the way the cover came out. And also, I just want to say there is an audio version of the book, and I did have some input on that. I was able to listen to voice actors, I guess, read a portion of the book, and I chose one, and I listened to the whole thing, and he did a terrific job on it. So, because I know there are many people who would prefer to listen rather than to read.
I love to listen to books, and when I'm driving around, I'm like, why don't I just make use of this time and do something enjoyable? So, starting with Brooke, do you have any current projects in the work that you can share?
I do. I just turned in a manuscript to my agent, who's going over it right now, so I'm waiting with bated breath. But it is about a woman who, as a child, was the only witness to her sister's abduction. And she was only 6 years old. She doesn't have a lot of memories from it, and she's removed from her family's home as a result. Fast forward 20 years later, her grandmother, who had been raising her, has passed away, and she's left her the house that she began her life in. And it was ultimately taken over by a very severe hoarding habit. And in the hoard, the story is about the main character kind of trying to revive her own memories of herself as a 6-year-old child, and kind of drum up any recollections that she can to help figure out what happened to her sister.
So as of right now, I'm not working on any full books, but I do have a couple short stories along the same lines. Most recent one I've written is about this place called Sonagachi in Calcutta, India. It's essentially just a hub of prostitution, and it's about a young girl who essentially grows up in that neighborhood. And so I've submitted it to a couple writing competitions, and one of them is publishing it in their like anthology of winners for their story. And I mean, on top of that, I'm a senior in high school, so my main writing project right now is obviously my college admissions stuff.
Okay, well, like Brooke, I too am waiting with bated breath on something that my editors currently have. So it's a novel called Bittersweets, and it's about, as I mentioned, someone who ends up owning a couple of bakeries, but her background is interesting. Her parents were Holocaust survivors. She's an only child. Much of it takes place, I often do write about Brooklyn, so it takes place in Brooklyn. And we look at her life and the things, her parents' background, certainly how they influenced her life, and it has a little bit of magic realism in this one too. So,
Love that. So at this point, I'd like to thank our panelists for this portion. Would anybody from the audience like to come up to the mic and ask a question? We also welcome questions for people who are attending virtually. They can put the questions in the chat window.
Hello, thank you guys. You did great. My question is about the two of you that have agents. How did you go about finding the agent? And I find it very interesting that you had worked with one for 10 years and it wasn't working out. So even just that journey of, researching agents online and your experience with that.
okay. The agent that I had for 10 years, my colleague friend, was going to a gym and she met me. She talks to people and found out that he's a literary agent. And so he was based in Manhattan and loved my work. And it didn't work out. He tried, but it didn't work out. So I'm indebted to him anyway, because it gave me, working with an agent kind of gave me faith. It gave me hope that maybe one day it would happen. My son, as far as the agent I have now, my son is a screenwriter, and his agent is William Morris. And so he gave my book, my other book, My Mother's Shoes, he got it into the hands of this agent. She loved it. She didn't work out at first with that one. It became a totally different book. Hopefully that will get published one day. And then took a look at this one, and that was it.
So I got my agent through querying. It was a very long, arduous process, but I was fortunate. I queried for 9 months, which I consider to be a very short amount of time in the grand scheme of things. I know people who have been querying for upwards of 5 years. I relied a lot on querytracker.net, I believe. And that just helped me kind of keep track of the agents I was researching, keep track of the responses that they sent, if they did send any, keep track of who I submitted to. And it was after 9 months, and I had 5 full manuscript requests when I was offered a representation by my current agent. So it was nice to kind of have a little bit of variety, but I'm with Folio Literary Management, and I'm very happy with my agent. I've had her 10 years. And it was a long road for us. But one thing that I appreciated about her was that she didn't give up on me when I was really ready to kind of give up the entire process. It was just kind of old fashioned querying and sending out letters and getting a lot of rejections.
So could you define, when you say querying, could you say a little bit more about what that is?
So querying essentially is when you are going to write a letter to an agent asking them if they would be willing to represent your work. So you don't pay an agent. They don't get paid unless you do. It's something that they have to kind of enter into a partnership with you. So you have to write a letter that kind of goes into a little bit about what your book is about. It's a very specific type of a letter. What your book is about, a little bit about your own background, and then you have to kind of research the agent to find out why their particular background would be a good fit for your book. So it does take a lot of legwork. There's hundreds and hundreds of agents, I would say, that are out there right now working, and each of them gets probably upwards of 100 queries a day. So you really only have about 30 seconds maybe to catch their attention and keep them reading. So it's very important to really hone your query letter and have that to perfection. I did batch submissions. So what that means is that I sent out a batch of 5 queries, and if I didn't get any response from those, then I would change my query letter. And then I would send out another batch. And if I got a little bit of feedback from those, say I got a partial request, then I would kind of keep it at that and keep going until I kind of had the formula that worked and ultimately started getting me the full requests.
Okay, we just have about another 2 minutes. I'd like to start with Brooke. If anyone in the group would like to share any last thoughts or words that we didn't get to during the panel presentation.
I just like to say, if you have an author that you've read their book or you're interested in reading their book, definitely, if you have an author you love, reach out to them and let them know. I think it's really important that authors get feedback on their work, and reviews are super important. Going on Goodreads and leaving a review, going on Amazon and leaving a review. Even if you didn't love the book, any kind of feedback is valuable. So definitely, if you have an author that you've read a book and you enjoyed it, hop on there, leave them a review. It's so helpful to an author as far as getting more readers and ultimately then allowing them to continue their career and continue writing books that you're going to enjoy.
I think kind of going off of that, I think one of the main things that I would like to leave you guys with is just to keep reading. I know like life gets busy and it gets hectic, but I feel like stories are just the most amazing way of uniting people through any tough times, and they're the best way to express any kind of emotion. So just keep reading, keep enjoying what you're reading.
And I just want to echo that too. Just, if you want to be a writer, you have to keep reading. I also got in touch with one writer, Gail Tsukiyama. She wrote Women of the Silk, and I love her work. And, I have at home, I have a list, and all the books, I keep my books. So I have a whole shelf full of books that I spoke to me and that I've loved all the years. And there doesn't seem to be enough time in the day to read. And I think that's the best thing you can do as a writer.
Thank you so much for our panelists, and thanks to everyone for attending, and to the East Brunswick Library and Melissa for putting this event together. Have a great night, everybody.